so we are recording now. So unfortunately, the recording does not capture my fabulous story about going to New York on the Grady journalism trip, and learning that there were really no full-time jobs in writing at magazines. But there we go. I just backtracked. So hello, everyone. I'm Amelia Pavlik. Now that's on the recording. So I'm on this trip and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, wait a second, there are no jobs. And that's when it really struck me that if I wanted to work in magazines, if I wanted to write, that freelancing was kind of going to be the way to go. And I finished things up. Probably one of my favorite professors for magazines was Dr. Hume. And I've actually been back over the years to speak to her classes when we could do things in person in years past. Um, and my goal has always been to kind of have a full-time job that was in communications of some sort, communications and marketing, and then to try and freelance where I could. But I got a little derailed from the freelancing dream for a while. I got married when I was fresh out of college, which was not really the intention. Talk about polar opposite from moving to New York and becoming an editorial assistant, right? But so I really didn't get back around to freelancing until I was getting divorced in my late 20s. And I remembered this dream of wanting to write for lifestyle magazines. That's the area that I always loved. Now, in the meantime, I had stayed in the communications and marketing industry. So at that point, I was actually, I've done a little bit of everything. I've worked at a biweekly newspaper. I've done technical editing for the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. I have worked at some higher education trade newsletters, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a minute. But about 11-ish years ago, I came to Georgia Tech, ironically enough, and found the job that I'm in right now, where I work in internal communications primarily. But like I said, it's been about 10, 11 years now since I thought, okay, freelancing. I want to get into this. Now, as you guys well know, you kind of are in the perfect position because you're still in school. You can easily move into this industry. It's a lot harder when all of a sudden you're 28 and you're going, I want to do this, and everyone else is already doing it, who is much younger and who has sometimes had a lot of other experiences that I didn't have, since I'd kind of been on the full-time job track. So what did I do? I knew I wanted to freelance, but how did I make that happen? Well, I found a friend of a friend who was a very successful freelance writer. Her name is Amy Fleury, and I think she's still out there doing wonderful things. And Amy was willing to talk to me. And Amy actually suggested a few publications here in Atlanta that she knew would be likely to work with new writers. Now, the unfortunate thing is, and so it goes in the publication industry, those publications actually are now defunct. So I can't recommend them to you guys. But for me at the time, they were Points North, Atlanta's Finest Dining, and Piedmont Review. These were publications that were willing to let a new writer kind of come in and get some clips. I think I did a lot of that work initially for free, just so that I could get the experience. But it got my foot in the door and it helped me start to build those clips. Now, I should say, when I was in college, I absolutely wrote. I wrote for, gosh, I wrote for the Red and Black here and there. There were a couple of magazines around Athens at the time that I did some work for. At the time, I had an article slated to be published in Athens magazine at the end of my last semester in college, and it got bumped, which if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to share the devastation of writing like I think it was like a 1,500 word feature and then being told, nope, sorry, we decided not to run it. Because that's rough. So I did do writing in college, but again, there was kind of this gap of doing any lifestyle writing for all those years. So getting my foot in the door at spots like Points North or Atlanta's Finest Dining was really helpful. The challenge was that I was interested in doing wellness writing in particular. And so I have also been a fitness teacher for, gosh, over 20 years now. I teach everything from bar to high intensity interval training to indoor cycling. So that kind of was the wellness component. And then also was very interested in writing about wellness travel. I love spas. I love yoga retreats and stuff like that. So the next hurdle that I faced after I had kind of gotten my foot in the door with freelancing was everybody said to me, "Well, you want to write about wellness, like where are your clips?" And I'm going, "Well, I can't show you that I can write about this until you give me an opportunity to write about it," which I'm going to guess that you all may have heard that already in your lives and careers. And if you haven't, you probably will. But it's okay because there are creative workarounds for that. And for me, it was to create my first blog and website, which was called the Fit and Well Atlanta Belle. And I used that as a platform to show that I could write sort of these wellness based articles that I wanted magazines or websites to accept pitches for. And that really worked out well for me. I sort of got my foot in the door with a publication that's no longer. I mean, are you seeing a trend here? I love magazines, but sometimes it's so disheartening to see how many have just gone the way of the dinosaurs over the years, you know? But got my foot in the door at a publication called American Fitness Magazine. Um, and then having those clips allowed me to one day get my foot in the door at Fitness Magazine's website, um, and so on and so forth. And it just kind of evolved. And over the years, I became kind of the wellness writer for a magazine that we have here in Atlanta called Simply Buckhead. I did that for about 2 years pretty consistently. And that kind of brings us to where I'm at right now, which is I decided during the pandemic that I really wanted to kind of create something of my own that couldn't go the way of the dinosaur. So I created a website that's editorially based, but I also offer some resources and services. So this new business is called Fresh Juice and Bubbly, and you all will receive a handout that has my top 10 tips for freelance writing and also my website and email and all of that good information after this session. But that website, I'm creating a lot more content for it that's original. And in addition to offering, like I said, the resources and services, like a series of city wellness guides they're like 15-page downloadable PDFs and people purchase them. And I also offer wellness concierge planning services, so a bunch of stuff. But I have done a lot less freelance writing over the last year to multiple publications because I've focused more efforts on Fresh Juice and Bubbly. Now, with that said, I still freelance write. So I put most of my efforts toward an outlet that's called VacaU Magazine. And I basically just write luxury travel for them, luxury wellness travel, that is. So I just turned in an article that was about a weekend visit to the Mandarin Oriental, Boston, and their spa, which was delightful. And then the other thing that I do freelance wise is I still freelance for the higher education trade newsletters that I worked for very early on in my career. And those are actually what we kind of call business to business publications because they're meant for specific targeted industries versus just our normal kind of lifestyle magazines or lifestyle websites. So these particular newsletters are read by people in enrollment management and registrars' offices. Now you guys are like, really? But the nice thing is there's a tie-in to what I'm doing in my full-time job. Um, so I understand that material. Oh, and hey, by the way, trade publications, business to business publications, they typically have the budget to pay their freelance writers better. So we can talk a little bit more about that as we go on too. So with all that said, I have done a lot of talking. I just kind of wanted to see, out of the group here, have you guys actually done any freelancing yet? Or is this something you're just interested in? And please feel free to chime in or chat. I know Zoom calls are always fun. Go ahead, Jacqueline.
Oh, I was just gonna say I haven't really done any freelance yet, but I'm just interested in starting.
Okay. And let's see, Lizette says or I don't want to make the presumption. I do not know Lizette's pronouns. So I will just say Lizette has done some freelance work, but not a lot. Okay. Devin, how about you?
I haven't done any.
Okay.
And I just graduated, so I'm
very interested, I'm sure.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, perfect. That's good to know as I kind of proceed. And guys, as we go on, feel free. I have stops for questions, but if you have questions along the way, I know we've all heard this before, but I embrace a more conversational format versus I'm talking at you like I just did for 15 minutes. So feel free to chime in or chat, and I can take a break. But kind of getting into some of my how I did all of this and maintaining a career in freelance. The first thing I'll tell all of you is that freelancing is tough, and I have never seen it be tougher than this year among a lot of my friends and colleagues who have done freelancing full time. I am a huge advocate of freelancing, but I personally have never done it full time. I'm a little bit too financially risk averse to not have a steady paycheck, and especially during the pandemic, that's what friends who are in particular niches of writing, like travel writing, all of a sudden they had no clients. Whereas thankfully, since I was writing about higher education, that didn't go away. And also at that time, even though I was writing about luxury wellness travel, I could still write about topics like, here are what 6 spa directors are doing for self-care during the pandemic and things like that. So my first recommendation is have a plan in place before you decide to go freelancing full time. Now, as Devin pointed out, Devin just graduated. So something is better than nothing, right? And that's great. But I have always had a full-time job. I've never done it 100%. With that said, I have had friends who have done it very successfully. But this is the challenge, is that in addition to the fact that the landscape of outlets to work with is forever evolving. I just listed about half of the spots that I've written for now don't exist. That doesn't mean that there aren't new ones cropping up all the time, but reaching out to these outlets and making contacts and whatnot, it takes time. So just having a backup plan to sort of help support what your bills are and things of that nature, I am a big endorser of that. So be patient with building those contacts. I think that goes without saying. The best advice I have there is take advantage of any opportunity you have to get out there and meet people or interact with people. one of the greatest benefits I've had from doing these sorts of events with Grady is that I've actually made contacts with students who have gone on to do great things like work at magazines where I wanted to freelance. And those students were able to connect me to contacts. For example, tonight, my financial planner is just went into business for herself, and she's hosting an event launch party. So she suggested that I attend to kind of network and get my name out there. Now, granted, that's a little bit different from the freelance focus, but it's useful for me with my business. Any events, any professional groups. Here in Atlanta, I'm a member of a group called the Atlanta Girl Gang. And I'm happy to provide more information if anybody wants that. And basically it's a social group, and you have women from all walks of life. And you never know. I know that a lot of times when we think about freelancing, we think about freelancing for a magazine, but there are a lot of freelance writing opportunities out there for all of us. There are opportunities to just write website content. There's opportunities to write content that, people might use in blogs that are ghostwritten. I mean, I encourage you not to think, oh, the only freelance jobs out there are related to writing and editing for magazines, websites, or newspapers, because there's a lot of content creation that needs to happen. And let me tell you, there are a lot of people who don't know how to write out there. So, and you don't know where one contact is going to lead. And I think a really great example of this is that years ago, I met a woman, Stephanie, who was the head editor at the Atlantan magazine here in Atlanta. And she always believed in me, gave me assignments. She went on to become the overarching editorial director of a really massive luxury magazine publisher in the United States called Modern Luxury. So when you travel around the country, they do Ocean Drive in Miami, they do the Atlantan here in town, they do Gotham magazine in New York, they have books all over the country. And Stephanie goes on to become the editorial director. Well, I had never written travel for any Modern Luxury magazine, even though I'd written everything else for their Atlanta books, which are Jezebel, which is different from the Jezebel most of us know. Jezebel's kind of like the social cosmopolitan of Atlanta. And then the Atlantan. I'd written wellness, food, profiles, you name it, but I'd never written travel because I couldn't get my foot in the door. They really only offered those assignments to a few freelance writers. And I think it was like 9 years of trying. And finally, before Stephanie left that role with Modern Luxury, she gave me a travel assignment. The article was published in 3 books. And it was like one of those career bucket list items for freelance where I was like, so that contact with Stephanie, even though it started 10, 15 years ago, has still paid off. And what's funny is now she's moved into a more low profile job, kind of doing sales and marketing for a neighborhood publisher here in Atlanta. And she's really enjoying it, but she's started her own blog that has become a passion project that I've just watched succeed. And she's come to me for advice. And I'm like, I'm giving Stephanie advice now when she's been my mentor. So you just never know where these relationships are gonna go. And I encourage you guys, please, after this session, feel free to reach out to me. I know I've been in enough of these Zoom meetings to know that it's kind of a little awkward. In some ways, I feel like it's more awkward to ask questions and interface virtually than it is sometimes when we're in the classroom together. But feel free to shoot me an email, tell me about your particular situation, and I'm happy to pass along advice on what I would do. Another way I have used to sort of build my network is researching LinkedIn and when I say researching, I mean looking for publications, outlets, whatever you're looking to write for, and looking for the people who have the jobs that are, as I'd call, kind of lower on the totem pole. So that would be your editorial assistants, people who are just kind of starting out themselves. I have had a lot of luck with trying to connect to those people on LinkedIn and then shooting them a message to say, do you guys accept pitches? You know, how does the process work? Who's the best person to reach out to? And I found that sometimes they're a lot more receptive to providing this information because they're closer to the experience than probably like an assistant editor is who's been doing this for years and kind of, in some cases, may forget what it's like to just be starting out and trying to get his or her foot in the door. So the LinkedIn strategy really works for me. Also, I would say this day and age, like, there's no harm in DMing someone on Instagram if you know that they're in a specific job that you're interested in learning more about. That would be another route that I'd take. Mm, sorry, all the talking, it kind of wears the voice out. And then in terms of building my brand, I think we all know you don't want to spread yourself too thin across social media because there is a new social media platform coming out practically every day, I feel like. So I choose to focus on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest. Those are kind of the ones I use for my professional uh my professional networking as well as building my company. I've had people say, but you should use Snapchat and TikTok. And I'm like, I think they're great and all, but like to do those platforms right, you have to invest a lot of time, right? And so you just need to be prepared and figure that out. So with all that said, does anybody have any questions at this point? Okay, I'll just keep going with my tips and advice. So another one that I always give is have business cards. I know people say the business card is dead. It is not. I can't tell you. There were times in between having the Fit and Well Atlanta Bell and Fresh Juice and Bubbly where I didn't have a proper business card to hand people because I hadn't figured out my brand, my logo yet, and I didn't want to invest in business cards. And I felt so naked, even during COVID, like when generally we weren't giving stuff out to people. It's just good to have them. Um, and I love paper products. I love a good cardstock and I love a good design. So I am really partial to a website company called moo.com, like literally like a cow moo. Um, they have beautiful business card options. They're a little pricier, but again, you don't have to print like 500. I just want you to have some. And then they're available if you need to give one out. I probably give out at least one business card a week for some reason or another. And the sort of latest advancement in my business cards is I have added a QR code to the back where that just allows people, I think in the time of COVID, we've all become even more accustomed to QR codes than we were before. People can just scan that QR code. And for my purposes, it takes them to a unique landing page on my website where they kind of get a special greeting. And since I'm trying to promote the goods and services of Fresh Juice and Bubbly, I offer a little discount. But, you know, if you had a business code with your own QR code on it, it could take people directly to your website, your business website, and or to your Instagram account if that's what you're trying to feature, wherever. It's just a nice little, I think, touch that makes it easier than somebody having to go and type in like find you on Instagram if that's where you're trying to direct people, or find you on the website, whatever. So you know, and side note, um I think websites still are very important, especially to those of us who are trying to write, because we need a place for our work to live. Um, in terms of websites, I have been with a company called Squarespace, which probably you guys have seen their advertisements because they're everywhere, but that is the platform that hosts my website that I have used since I launched the Fit and Well Atlanta Bell. So gosh, almost 10 years. And I do pay a monthly fee to house my site there, but I think it's like 20 something dollars depending upon the plan. And it's just been a really efficient way for me to have that professional website. So definitely have one, and don't wait. This is the hard thing too, especially as you start picking up more freelancing assignments. Don't wait to update it. Like, that is your calling card. That is where you're sending people. As soon as you get a new assignment, like, get that clip, get that link onto your website so that people aren't like looking at it going, well, the last time so and so Devin had an assignment, it was in January of 2019. What has Devin been doing since then? So just a little food for thought. Another opportunity to get your foot in the door is to connect with the PR firms, PR boutique firms. Like, they're big, they're small. And again, I'm always happy to share that information. I think I learned more and more and connected to more PR people as I did more work with publications, because they kind of would come across my name from articles and they'd reach out to me with pitches. These people are our friends. And I don't know what your perception is and what it's like these days, but I feel like once upon a time when I was in journalism school in the early 2000s, I graduated in '04. Um, I feel like in a way the journalism majors, like, we sort of looked down on the PR majors a little bit, like, because we were writing and editing and maybe it felt more substantial than doing PR. But the biggest lesson I've learned being out in the real world is what a symbiotic relationship we have. Um, we want to be on our PR colleagues' good side because they are the ones with clients that we want to write about. Um, and if you get a reputation, for example, um, a lot of travel journalists go on media trips, um, which are typically planned by PR people, and so the PR people get to pick and choose who are coming on these trips. And I have been on trips with people who have just behaved horribly. I mean, and they've been invited on this trip, and then I have my friends in the PR industry who uh who will tell me candidly, and I should say they're my friends, and they're sharing this with me in a friend capacity, not in a work capacity. Oh, I'd never invite those people on another trip again. So maintaining those relationships and not burning bridges and just being polite, like, it goes a long way. And you know, the PR people are also connected to outlets and publications that you aren't, and that maybe you want to know about. And so you never know when that individual at XYZ PR company could connect you to someone else. Also, the PR people do a lot of events. The more events you can go to, the more ideas you get, the more people you're connected with. And when I say events, I mean things like, you know, uh, a restaurant is celebrating its 10th anniversary. And so they'll invite journalists and influencers to attend. And you might get anything from a sit down meal to apps and free drinks, or one of these media trips that I'm talking about, where a destination is looking to promote their new property, their new hotel. And so they might invite 7 journalists out for an all expenses paid trip. So yeah, you want to be on the radar for these things, because every touch point you have with new people is an opportunity to potentially do something great in the future. Be willing to write for free. I know that's hard, but it really is helpful to get your foot in the door. To this day, I will still write for free or for a low paycheck. The luxury wellness website that I was telling you about, VacaU Magazine, right now I get paid $50 an article for about, I'd say like an 800 to 1,000 word article. But I'm able to go on trips to visit spas and whatnot, and sometimes get complimentary or discounted experiences doing things I would want to do anyways in my personal life. So it's kind of a trade-off. In your case is like you just want to get your foot in the door. So doing something for uh, a little bit of money or no money at all, just to get that clip, whether it's electronic or physical, I highly recommend. As I mentioned, lifestyle publications, they're great. I mean, they're beautiful, and it's so cool to see your article out there. Um, and I love them, but they do not pay as well as sometimes the business to business, the trade publications that I mentioned. So if you have some area in which you have expertise. So again, because my first job out of university was working in these higher education trade newsletters. Actually, that wasn't my first job. That was like my third job, but it happened within the first 2 years. um, I was editor for these higher education trade newsletters, and I learned all about deans and provosts, people who led continuing education programs, enrollment managers, all this good stuff. Then flash forward like 5 or 6 years, and I'm working at Georgia Tech. And in my role in internal communications, I do a lot of enrollment management work. I know what's going on in the registrar's office. So I have been able to translate that experience into freelancing for these higher education trade newsletters that I worked 4 years ago in my career. And the money is a lot better. um, and actually has made it to where I could see how people could freelance full time if I had a client like these trade newsletters all the time. So again, if you have interest, because I know that one of the next sessions is on pitching, um, you know, I'm not going to get too far into how you would connect to these B2B publications, but just keep that in the back of your mind that those assignments, they might not be as sexy, but they can definitely help pay the bills. And then the last thing that I kind of want to throw out there is contracts. Sometimes I've signed contracts for work and sometimes I haven't. What I just want all of you to be really aware of, this goes back to that article I wrote for Athens Magazine that never saw the light of day. Don't commit to a massive project and a lot of work with an outlet until you're sure that they are going to pay you and pay you in a timely manner. Because FYI, my trade newsletter client, they pay me like it's a miracle. I put in an invoice and they pay me within 2 to 3 weeks. I have had lifestyle magazines, like when I've written for those modern luxury magazines, it has sometimes taken 4 to 6 months to get a paycheck for like, I think it was like $150 to $300. So you just want to be sure that you're protecting yourself, and not getting in over your head. So I would suggest like take one assignment from a new outlet, see how it goes, but don't commit to multiple assignments for one outlet until you know that they're going to be good on their end of the deal, just like you're going to be good on your end of the deal. So with all of that said, do you guys have more specific questions about building your network, and tips and strategies, or about anything that I've said thus far?
The points you just touched on were interesting. Have you ever had something that you've written and it was published, but you didn't get paid for it?
That's a good question. And I hate it when people say that's a good question, so strike that. I'm having a difficult time. I don't think that particular situation has happened. I have had, for American Fitness Magazine, when it was starting to go under, I had written about 3 articles for them that were unpublished because the editor likes to kind of stockpile content. And I was okay with it because I was getting to write travel and do the travel and whatnot. But in that case, I was actually, even though they never were published, I was given what they call a kill fee, which was a percentage of what I would have been paid. I think it was like 20% of what I would have been paid if the article had actually been published. So that's happened. And then I have also had, and again, I don't want to get too far down the pitching road, since that's like the next topic in a few weeks. But I have actually pitched an idea to a publication and it was rejected. And then a few months later, saw in the publication that I mean, there was no way, based on the details that were featured in that article, that it was not my idea, because because it just lined up too closely with when the issue came out, when I submitted the pitch. And I went to the editorial director and just said, like, hey, look, I don't want to be paid for this. Like, that's not my concern here. What my concern is that we are expected to submit our pitches on the honor system, and the expectation is that we bring you ideas, and if you want to use that idea, you will assign us the article. But you're not supposed to take my idea. And I don't want this to happen to other writers, because it was a publication I had a pretty long-standing relationship with, and it never did happen again. But yeah, I don't think anything has ever run that I wasn't paid for, thankfully. Thanks, Lizette. Other questions, my friends? I guess my question to you is, so what steps are you taking now to connect to people? Or based on what I've said to you, what will be your first step to try and make a freelancing connection?
I will say that I've started, like, these talks have been something that I've been making connections through. I haven't really like been thinking about them in a freelance point of view, but I guess like having alumni would help with that in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like with professors too at Grady.
Well, and I haven't talked to, I think Dr. Hume's the only one left from my days at Grady, but she and we have had a relationship on and off for years, where I've come to magazine club and spoken to them, or I've come to her class and spoken to it. And yeah, you never know. You never know where any relationship, and this goes way beyond just freelancing, these networking opportunities can just pay off dividends for years to come in ways that you never even anticipated. So, are any of you doing anything to market yourself currently?
That actually is a question I guess I have, is just if you have any ideas of finding a niche for yourself, because I know that's an important thing nowadays.
So what are you interested in, Jacqueline?
That's the
I
thing.
know.
I'm interested. Yeah, I guess that is something I have to like find out for myself, but I'm not quite sure there's like a one specific field that I'm super interested in. I
Yeah.
just like doing general stuff at this point. But I guess maybe my question was more like, how do you market yourself?
Okay. Well, in terms of what you're saying with identifying a subject, I think I came to mine without really intending to. I mean, like I said, in college, I decided I wanted to start teaching group fitness classes. And I've always loved nice hotels and loved visiting spas. And so it sort of married into fresh juice and bubbly and all the wellness writing. And then the higher ed writing just came out of a job. And so I think pursuing your interests there, that's key, right? Just and it might be, even if you don't necessarily get a job that's more broad based, like at a magazine or something like that, you know, if it's in a specific industry, taking the time to learn more about that and kind of understand that industry and figure that out. In terms of marketing yourself, I think the more you can get involved in various professional groups, that's really helpful. Um, you know, as in terms of freelancing, gosh, I've worked in internal communications for so long that the professional organizations I'm part of are kind of more focused on like the International Association of Business Communicators or Public Relations Society of America. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of really great professional groups for freelancers. But I think this is really where the alumni connections come in, and utilizing Samantha and sort of the career services office. I don't remember really, or maybe I just, we're much wiser as time goes by, but using those resources and the connections that you can have through Grady are really helpful. And then also, I have, in my role at Georgia Tech, I typically have a student assistant working with me. And so I've gotten to the point now where if there are certain assignments that somebody reaches out to me with that I can't do, I will pass those on to student assistant, like, not clearly these are people who have graduated now and are looking for jobs, because it would be a little awkward for me to be doing that, a bit of a conflict of interest if they were still working for me in Georgia Tech capacity. But just finding these sort of unique little ways to make connections. And again, I'm happy to talk, like if you want to bounce specific ideas off of me, I'm happy to give you feedback. But it's really just the more people you can talk to and connect with. Yeah. And then I know I'm seeing in the chat, Lisette said that Lisette has several mentors in large newsrooms. Yeah. And the journalism conferences. Lisette, what are some of the journalism conferences that you're going to?
I just recently, last week was the Investigative Reporter and Editors Conference, and
Perfect.
The National Association of Hispanic Journalists has their conference going on now. So I've been meeting a lot of people through those.
Perfect.
And then
Yeah.
I was just
Go
gonna say
ahead.
there's websites like journalismmentors.com where you can just set up a phone call with people and make connections that way.
Yeah, there again, it's funny because as your freelance career goes on, you get so in the weeds of doing the assignments and just going to the events that you're not thinking about how to get your foot in the door as broadly as when you're starting out like this, because once it gets going, it's just kind of a machine that keeps working, and one thing leads to another as long as you keep it moving. So yeah, I think Lisette's idea of going to the professional conferences, I am a huge believer in conferences and any kind of professional development, because in addition to the contacts those opportunities provide, it's also providing you with sort of the latest and greatest ideas in a specific area. Other questions? Silence. Is everybody exhausted on a Wednesday? Well, if that is all the group has for me, again, I have provided a handout to Samantha that it doesn't look too sexy here. My printer did things wonky, but it's basically my top 10 freelance tips. Things that I kind of went over here, but also just sort of writes them out about having a business card and gives you that website. Also some advice about scheduling informational interviews with people and reaching out to people who are lower on the totem pole. So anyway, and like I said, on this sheet, you get all of my social media contact, my email. Feel free, reach out, please. Again, in my full-time job, I regularly am working with a student at Georgia Tech who is sort of my communications intern. So I really enjoy doing this sort of thing. and I'm happy to assist in any way that I can. And so from what I've been told, you can just disconnect from here, or if you have a question for Samantha, you can go back to the main room. But I really appreciate your time and your attention today, and wish you all the best in whatever you have coming next with freelance, college, whatever. So on that note, have a wonderful Wednesday, everyone.